This is how CIA Black Ops actually work. All three targets had made a fatal error. For weeks, they followed the exact same routine. Every morning, three high-value members of the terror group walked into the same small coffee shop, sat at the same table, and talked for hours about world events, strategy, and whatever else was on their minds. Same time, same table, every day. It didn't take long for the local CIA field office to notice the pattern, and once they did, they authorized human surveillance. The CIA agent was nondescript, ordinary, dressed in modest local attire. He looked remarkably unremarkable. Not a James Bond, not a Jason Bourne. For real field agents, looking and acting as ordinary as possible was their biggest strength. The agent would mirror their routine. He would show up just before them, order a coffee, and take a seat nearby, a spot where he could watch and listen as he read his newspaper. The breakthrough came weeks later. The three targets, key players in planning attacks against the United States, had grown used to seeing the ordinary man at the coffee shop every morning. But this day was different. All it took was a polite nod as the targets passed by. Only one returned it. This was the new target. The weeks continued and the greetings between the CIA agent and the polite terrorists grew ever slightly warmer. Nods turned to full head bows, then to brief verbal greetings. All at once the situation came to a head. Months of surveillance, endless careful observation, one field agent's life, and everything he worked for hung on one crucial interaction. This morning, the terrorist asked if he could sit with the CIA agent. The men exchanged polite conversation and greetings, and then the CIA agent asked him one question that would blow the operation wide open. How is your family? A week later, the terror suspect was being interviewed by the CIA interrogators, a process that he had volunteered for. The terrorist had flipped, and now fed the CIA critical intelligence on the local terror network's operations. Why? Because the CIA agent tasked with surveilling him had simply been polite to him. In all my time in this country, you were the only person to ever ask me about my family. I'm tired. I just want to go home. In exchange for everything he knew about the terror group's organization and operations, the man was given a passport and a flight home back to Egypt. He could rejoin his family and live on in anonymity. If you think you know how CIA black operations work, you probably don't. The movie and TV portrayal is iconic. Field agents deep undercover in hostile nations, chasing terrorists and international criminals. Cue the inevitable shootout, and after a dazzling display of gunplay, the CIA agent terminates the threat. The world is safe once again. In the real world, CIA operations very rarely work like this at all. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen. But for the most part, the CIA black operations are less about gunplay and violence and more about manipulation, diplomacy, and a lot of boring surveillance work. First, it's important to differentiate between the types of operations that might involve an intelligence agency like the CIA. Black Ops is a catch-all term used by the public, but that doesn't reflect the reality of what the CIA actually does. Rather, the agency practices different types of operations. The first is covert action. This is an operation that's planned and executed so that the sponsor's identity is completely hidden. In other words, the US might do it, but nobody can pin the blame on them for a lack of a smoking gun. Plausible deniability is very important in the world of diplomacy, and thus intelligence agencies place a premium on it. Examples include paying locals or third parties to do the dirty work for you, whether they know it or not. Clandestine operations, on the other hand, are affairs where the operation itself is kept entirely hidden and secret from discovery. A good example of this is the CIA's raiding of a Soviet weather outpost along the Arctic Circle. Outpost NP-8 had been built on a drifting ice floe, and the team assigned to it evacuated due to extreme weather. The station could only be reached when the weather allowed via a treacherous ice runway. The runway had been destroyed by crushing ice, forcing its abandonment. The Soviets evacuated the crew, but they didn't bother with the equipment or the documents. They assumed that they'd be lost to the elements. Anyway, the surrounding ice pack was too thick for submarines or icebreakers and far beyond the reach of any land-based helicopter. To the CIA and the Navy's Office of Naval Research, the abandoned station was a golden opportunity. They could gather data on Soviet weather prediction and investigate possible weather modification experiments. But, most importantly, they could understand how the Soviets tracked US submarines under the ice. The only problem was there was no realistic way to reach it. The Navy immediately put Major James Smith of the U.S. Air Force and Lieutenant Leonard A. Lashak of the Naval Reserve through jump school. The men would parachute onto the abandoned station, collect the information, and then be pulled out using a skyhook extraction. After 5 days on the frozen base, a massive balloon slowly rose up into the sky. A recovery aircraft snatched the long tether dangling from it. The 2 men and a treasure trove of Soviet documents and equipment were safely recovered, completing a mission that had seemed impossible. Operation Cold Feet is the perfect example of a classified operation. Nothing about it could be plausibly denied. Only the US government had the resources and the reach to pull it off, and if they were discovered, there'd be no way to cover it up. Next, we come to the Black Ops. This is a misnomer that gets thrown around a lot. Black Ops aren't actually an official US government term. It's a catch-all used by the military and the public to describe highly classified, unacknowledged special access programs. To create cover, these usually unacknowledged operations will create evidence pointing to an innocent or not-so-innocent third party. Black operations are the most sensitive and secretive that the CIA undertakes. These are the missions usually deemed critical to national security or even existential to the survival of the American state. Black Ops can be so secretive, in fact, that it is strongly rumored that some projects aren't even under the purview of the director of the CIA, which might seem like an impossibility until you understand CIA structure. Historically, the CIA director is often kept in the dark, sometimes not even fully briefed or briefed at all, unless a critical decision is required. Within the CIA, the director is largely a political appointment. They may not even come from the agency itself, and almost inevitably, a new administration replaces them. The people making the mission happen are often far below the political spotlight. That's why insiders often say, don't look to the director for secrets. Look instead to the lower-tier positions, the roles staffed by career CIA men and women, because they're the ones who actually know what's happening. Positions like the Deputy Director for Science and Technology or the Associate Deputy Director for Support, who oversees the CIA's entire logistics system, the largest of any spy agency in the world, are where the real power lies. These are the people who stay in place as administrations come and go, the true secret keepers within the CIA. Want to keep uncovering hidden government secrets? Make sure to like, share, and subscribe before someone in Langley notices. The main arm of the CIA responsible for what people would commonly call Black Ops is the Special Activities Center. These are the agents tasked with 2 key types of operations: special operations and political actions. Special operations are made up of individuals recruited from Tier 1 military units, such as Delta Force and SEALs. These individuals are usually headhunted directly by recruiters, picked for their combat record, skills, and this might surprise you, their character. There are plenty of tough guy alpha male Rambos within America's Special Forces community. In fact, it is kind of a historical problem, with a growing criminality directly linked to Special Forces operators. These are not the types the CIA usually seeks. In a foreign country cut off from direct support, charisma, diplomacy, and people skills are far more valuable than brute strength. Some of the best field agents are not the toughest, they're the most intelligent and persuasive. They infiltrate targets, turn double agents, and smooth over potential diplomatic disasters, all without ever firing a shot. That is not to say that the CIA doesn't also have heavy hitters. When talking or blackmail won't do, you send in a direct action force to capture or neutralize an objective. While the CIA maintains its own teams, it often works directly with Tier 1 units within the US military. A great example of this is the capture of al-Qaeda operative Nazi Abdul Hamed al-Rukai in Libya, a rare example of a CIA-led raid captured on video. In the video, a suspect vehicle is being tailed by a white van. As soon as the target comes to a stop, the van swerves around to block it. Then a second vehicle rushes in, likely the reason the target had stopped in the first place. Its path is suddenly cut off. Every move is calculated, every second counts. A Delta Force operative steps out of the passenger side of the van and immediately neutralizes the driver. Operatives snatch al-Rukai from the back seat, zip-tie him, and throw him into the van. Other operatives scour the vehicle for any items of possible intelligence value, like cell phones, laptops, or tablets. Down the street, a third CIA vehicle has blocked off traffic and drives past as the van leaves. The target vehicle is itself driven away by either a Delta Force operative or a CIA agent, to be disposed of clandestinely. The entire operation was over in 2 minutes. It was perfectly executed. Well, except for one single glaring flaw. The entire affair was captured on a home surveillance camera that the field team had failed to identify and neutralize. This is where we dive into the meat and potatoes of field work and how black ops are executed. Reconnaissance is critical to any operation, and this involves everything from knowing the layout of a certain location to the businesses, homes, and any VIPs, security, and surveillance systems. Anything that could affect the success of the mission must be accounted for. No detail is insignificant in preparation for an op. Knowing that locals in one specific neighborhood prefer to take their coffee in a certain way can mean the difference between success or failure. Remember that mission in the coffee shop? A tiny detail, like not knowing that locals in that neighborhood don't take milk in their coffee, could have instantly marked a field agent as a foreigner. Every detail matters. This is why the CIA is overwhelmingly made up of analysts who make up the long, hefty shaft of the spear, which field agents are just a tiny little spear point on. Without their work, field agents couldn't do their job. Next time you watch a James Bond film, spare a thought for the dozens of analysts behind the scenes. They're the ones who make it possible for Bond to find his target, survive in hostile environments, and avoid being identified or killed. Then there is the second half of black operations. Influence and political action operations make up a significant amount of the CIA's daily efforts, and not just them, but of global intelligence agencies. Remember the controversial shootings by ICE in Minnesota in early 2026? Social media was instantly flooded with AI-generated images and bot-driven disinformation campaigns surrounding the events. This was a clear example of a covert influence operation meant to divide the American population. Who was behind it? The usual suspects include Russia, China, and Iran, who are deeply invested in causing civil strife in the US as a means of weakening it. Accounts linked to Iranian, Russian, and Chinese intelligence were playing to both liberal and conservative sentiments. A classic influence operation. The CIA also plays this game, leveraging social media and artificial intelligence to shape global narratives. Today, if you're on social media, you are often interacting with 1/4 to 1/3 fake accounts. They're bots designed to push either an intelligence agency's agenda or a corporate one. U.S. government efforts are linked to numerous instances of unrest inside Iran, and most recently 6,000 Starlink units were covertly shipped into Iran and passed out to protesters. It was an effort to keep people connected after the government cracked down on internet access, allowing protesters to continue organizing and communicating despite the restrictions. CIA black ops can also involve economic manipulation. In Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the author John Perkins makes it clear how the CIA has manipulated entire nations economically to bend them toward U.S. interests. It's alleged that convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was himself a CIA asset. He was directly linked to efforts to sway Saudi Arabia toward U.S. and British interests. The scandal first broke in the mid-2000s when BAE Systems, a British defense contractor, was exposed for paying bribes to Saudi officials. But the story went even further back, all the way to the 1980s. That's when BAE allegedly funneled millions in bribes to secure arms deals. The CIA backed this strategy with two clear goals: make Saudi Arabia a strong counter to Iran and ensure the kingdom remained dependent on Western weapons, keeping them both friendly and compliant. It's at this point that Jeffrey Epstein enters the story. According to the Epstein files, in 2019, authorities discovered a fake Austrian passport issued in the 1980s. Under a different name, Epstein listed his official residence as Saudi Arabia. Independent analysts theorized that the entry and exit stamps on the passport closely mirror the timeline of the infamous BAE arms deals and bribe payments. By the way, did you know that you just lived through the foiling of a major black ops aimed against you? The recent forced sale of TikTok's U.S. operations may have seemed like economic posturing, but in fact it was a matter of urgent national security. TikTok is notorious amongst the intelligence community as one of the most effective influence operation tools ever built. Chinese intelligence fully utilized TikTok to run influence operations on Americans and gather data on them to help them perfect future operations. If that sounds far-fetched, then you might have missed a November 3, 2023 incident where protesters chained themselves to a U.S. Navy resupply ship. The ship was claimed to be on its way to pick up weapons destined to go to the Middle East. While the protesters were acting on their own beliefs, for intelligence professionals within the CIA, the incident raised serious alarm bells. The fear is that foreign adversaries like Chinese intelligence could fully utilize algorithms on platforms like TikTok to run similar influence operations and mobilize well-meaning individuals into taking similar actions. The end result could be the delay of critical warfighting supplies to forward forces, leaving them vulnerable to destruction and defeat. The sale of TikTok effectively ended Chinese intelligence influence over the app. Of course, this also means it opened up the possibility of American influence instead. Putting all the pieces together, the typical CIA-led Black Op will follow a very similar timeline. Let's walk through a hypothetical operation targeting a suspect terrorist and break down how it might play out. First, incoming intelligence is assessed for threats or opportunities. Suppose reports emerge of an individual plotting attacks or conducting terrorism. This would immediately trigger a review at a CIA desk. The agency's network of informants, signals intelligence, and field contacts mean that few developments go unnoticed. Next, once the individual is identified and assessed, a senior team meets to review all available intelligence and define strategic objectives. In this case, the goal is clear: gather actionable intelligence on the target's plans, networks, and associates. If possible, recruit insiders or assets within the individual's circle to provide ongoing information, known as compromat, material that could be used to influence behavior or disrupt operations. Next comes the seeking of legal authorization. The CIA is supposed to get legal authorization for any operation it undertakes. The process typically involves review by the executive branch and the Senate's Gang of 8, senior members of Congress who oversee intelligence activities. Some legacy programs have historically bypassed these oversight processes, justified by secret executive orders, highlighting the legal gray areas that Black Ops sometimes operate in. Either way, the legacy program represents a complete constitutional crisis. The next step is operational planning. Here, the CIA will begin the nuts and bolts planning of an operation meeting its stated goals. This involves identifying any holes in intelligence as well as outlining what specific new intelligence is required. How will the target be surveilled without detection? What methods of covert monitoring or communication interception will be employed? How will collected data be retrieved or transmitted securely for analysis? With a plan in place, it's time to recruit assets. Field agents will identify people close to the target, associates, couriers, or facilitators who might be persuaded, coerced, or recruited to provide intelligence. These insiders can offer invaluable access and context that is otherwise impossible to obtain remotely. Then, the operation is executed. Surveillance begins, intelligence is collected, and assets are activated. The operation might uncover plots, logistics networks, or illegal activity. This is assessed for immediate threat mitigation while maintaining plausible deniability and legal cover. And here we get to the damage control and plausible deniability phase of the operation. Part of the damage control involves silencing the primary witness. This phase of an operation may not be necessary all the time, but when an op experiences massive blowback, it's critical that the CIA distance itself and the US government from any potential scandals or wrongdoing. The entire process can take anywhere from months to as much as a decade or more. More than anything, Black Ops are a test of patience, years of planning and waiting for the perfect opportunity before making a move. So next time you see a spy film, remember that what you're seeing is basically the last 1% of an operation that likely took years to put together. And while that gives you a clear picture of how a typical operation unfolds, what you're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. If you thought this was intense, wait until you find out the insane declassified CIA secrets you aren't supposed to know. Or click on this video instead.